So yeah, really nice to be here with you all today and to share kind of what we did in the project and looking forward to chatting to you more about it afterwards. Just to give you a bit of context, first of all, so we run Greater Govan Hill, a community magazine in Govan Hill in the south side of Glasgow. If you don't know Govan Hill, it's one of the most diverse neighbourhoods in all of Scotland. It's got loads of great people and projects and creativity and activism and community stuff happening. Um, it's also one of the more deprived neighbourhoods in Scotland. So this research I just saw today, actually, is new research that come out around neighbourhoods in Glasgow, which shows that there's a high degree of children living in poverty, for example, and there's a lot of health inequalities affect people, and there's other kind of social issues related to that too. So I set up this magazine called Greater Given Hill in 2020 now. And the idea for the magazine was to really be a platform for voices you don't typically hear in the media, to break down barriers that might exist between communities, to take a solutions focused lens to covering local issues, and ultimately to bring people together. So we produce a free, high quality magazine every 2 to 3 months, and we distribute that around the neighbourhood with 4,000 copies going out around Govan Hill, but also the surrounding areas. We operate it out of our community newsroom, which is a public facing space which we also use for events and training and workshops as well. So for this particular project, we developed the idea of digging into data, and we wanted to essentially teach data journalism skills to community members, aiming to build confidence, to make data more accessible, to support community journalism, to encourage solutions-focused storytelling on local issues, to create wider community benefit around the stories that were told, and to strengthen our future practice in terms of working with data. So what we did for that was we developed and delivered a 7-week training program, which was held mostly in person in our community newsroom, but we also did some online sessions too. We focused on data journalism, but also combining it with solutions journalism. So not just highlighting problems and issues, but really trying to dig into what data was there around solutions to the issues that we uncovered. We brought in experts from journalism and data fields. So some people from Research Data Scotland came along, but we also had data journalism experts from around the country as well. We provided one-on-one mentoring to support individuals who participated, and we enabled everyone to produce one piece of, or at least one piece of data-driven reporting that we published in a magazine. This is what we covered in the course. It was a 7-week course. We ran over 7 consecutive weeks. We looked at, what is journalism? What is the point of journalism? How it can build power. We explored data journalism and how that kind of fits into the wider journalism field. We looked at how to report on solutions and develop story ideas. We looked at where to find data, what data existed out there in the public domain, and when it wasn't in the public domain, how to get hold of it. We looked into how to ask questions of data and find stories within that. We did basic data analysis, including cleaning of data, using pivot tables, that kind of thing. And then we looked at how to turn that data analysis and the stories we found in the data into publication using writing, but also data visualization as well. This is one of the sessions from our group. So I think there was about 15 participants in all, from a really wide range of backgrounds, from different ages, different ethnicities, and different experiences with data and journalism. Some people, had worked with data in their kind of everyday work and never done any journalism. Some people had a little bit of a background in journalism, but never had touched data before. And some people had no experience of it either. So it was a very kind of mixed group. And what we found was there was a lot of benefit in having those different skills because people were able to help each other out. And there's a lot of peer learning that went on as part of the sessions. These are some of the slides from the data journalism sessions that we did. So looking really about how we think about storytelling with data, how we think about visualizing it, how we can present it, how we can really think about kind of ethical concerns and relations to that, and then how to do kind of, that basic data analysis and exploring data and stories within it. This was the magazine that most of the stories that we published went into, digging into data. We, say, published 4,000 copies. It went around the local neighborhood, and we published the stories online as well. And yeah, so of the 15 participants that came along, I think there was 12 pieces of original data journalism. Not everyone was able to complete the course for different reasons. We published them across two main issues. We had a launch event in the newsroom when people came along and presented their work. And we produced a radio show on a local station, Radio Buena Vida, where again we had people talking about their stories that they did and also choosing some music to go with it. So it was just ways of getting the stories out there in different formats. Some of the stories that we did included a really wide range of people either producing their own data sets or going out and finding some. So we had a couple of people, for example, who who produced kind of local stories related to the evolution of Vicky Road, really examining how uh, the shops had changed over the past sort of, I think, 10, 15 years, looking back through what data that existed to explore back to 2008 up until 2005, and then exploring what that meant about what was changing and why. We had someone else who went out and did a survey of people in uh, queer inclusive football teams to understand what spaces there were for people who maybe didn't feel like they felt comfortable in mainstream football, and exploring what impact and what kind of experiences they'd had, and then producing stories around that. We also had people kind of looking into data sets that have been published in recent times. So we had someone exploring the rise of measles cases, for example, why it's back and what could be done about it. We had someone looking into the inaccessibility of benefits for pe young people living with disabilities. We also had some kind of broader ones that looked into, for example, the impact of fires in the south side, how many fires there were, what was causing them and why, and what could be done about it. And we had someone looking into homes and how the housing kind of crisis, exploring issues of ownership, issues of rising prices, and again, digging into the kind of stories around that. In terms of the impact on participants, so many people said that before that they didn't feel very confident with data, with journalism. They find it confusing and inaccessible. And afterwards, they felt more confident in writing articles, developing ideas, and understanding and questioning data, not just for the stories they did, but more generally too. People said that they really felt empowered to kind of see their work published in this way, to see the responses to their work online, for example, and to understand how much their voice and their experience mattered. What I think worked really well in terms of the project was, we didn't hopefully make it very intimidating for people. We really started with a broad question about what issues people cared about and what stories they wanted to dig into. And then we started thinking about data in relation to that. So we began with the stories that people cared about most. We used plain language. We tried to avoid jargon. We tried to keep it as accessible as possible, and treating data as a tool to dig into these stories rather than just the focus. We also think there was a lot of peer learning, which say, which really helped for people to, they were pairing up and supporting each other with their stories, using different skills people had. And then we had one-on-one mentoring with ourselves and other members of the kind of teaching team to develop their ideas into stories. If we were doing it differently, I think we'd maybe had a bit more time with the program. It was 7 weeks, but maybe the sessions were quite short. We would have maybe allowed a bit more time for people to develop their ideas and to turn things around. And in terms of what's changed, some of the stories that we produced through this are most read articles from last year. So we know that they really have been landing in terms of people, and people really responding to the stories that people told. For us as a magazine, we're more likely to start thinking about when there was a data element that we could bring into a story and how we can visualize that. And that's now become much more part of our common practice. And those that have been involved with the course have gone on to produce other stories for us and then stayed involved and coming up with new ideas for database stories that they want to do. And there's also interest in taking forward some of the work that we started before in terms of doing more group work, in terms of like digging into, for example, local ownership in the neighbourhood and things that we haven't progressed with yet, but that's still in our plans to do as a future project. Some of the key learnings that we had is that you don't need to be a data expert to use data meaningfully with communities. So we know we really drew upon the expertise that was around us, and brought people in, and we found that so many people were really willing and wanting to help and really kind of engage with the program, both from the teaching and the learning perspectives. Um, that we should start, start with people's questions rather than data sets, encourage a wide definition of what data is, and recognize that, so while some people might be happy with large data sets and complex things, other people might be happy, going out and doing some basic analysis from their local streets. So trying to make it as accessible possible to people with different skill sets. Um, Other learnings were to build trust and confidence before getting into technical skills, to stay flexible in response to where people are, and to remember that small confidence gains can lead to big impacts. And that's what we've seen, and we often see with our community reporter training programs is that people come along and they do something that they haven't done before, and actually they grow in confidence, they make new connections, and that goes on to have wider impacts on them and their lives and the community around us.